Good morning, everyone. Welcome to La Hora del Cafecito. Coffee break with cards. La Hora del Cafecito's new sister show. Sorry, just got back from La Hora del Cafecito. My name is Lourdes Quinones, and I would like to welcome you to the show. Coffee Break with Card is a program dedicated to all of those in our community who are living with autism, to their family members, and to all those who support them. So come on in, join us at the table, and sign in the comment section below, and let us know if you're having your cup of coffee with us. We'd love to say hello to you. In today's program, we will be talking about social narratives. What are they, and why they're so helpful for the individuals with autism. And Olivia will be sharing with us some suggestions on how to create these stories or how to modify them so they can be used in the daily lives of our loved ones with autism. So join us. We have a lot to talk about. But before we get started, let's start out by introducing to you your coffee break hostesses for today. As I mentioned before, my name is Lourdes Quinones. I am a car consultant assigned to the primary age group. And professionally, I am a pediatric physical therapist as well as a special education teacher. I am joined by my colleagues, Jasmine Castellanos. Buenos días, Jasmine.
Buenos días, Lourdes. Good morning, everyone.
And Olivia McDonald. Buenos días, Olivia.
Buenos días, Lourdes. Good morning.
As you know, Jasmine Castellano is an excellent professional in the field of mental health, and she's a card consultant assigned to the youth group for middle school to young adults. And she's the mother of three children, one of whom is diagnosed with autism. Welcome, Jasmine.
Thank you, Lourdes.
Olivia McDonald is an excellent professional in the field of public health, and she's a card consultant assigned to the primary age group, just like me. And Olivia is the mother of a beautiful baby boy and has a younger brother diagnosed with autism. Welcome, Olivia.
Thank you, Lourdes. Happy Friday.
Yes. Miguel Dana is unfortunately sick today, and she's not going to be able to join us this morning. So we send her our love and wish her speedy recovery. She'll be back with us, God willing, in 2 weeks for our next show. So sending her our love and speedy recovery again. We hope you feel better, Maggie. Anyway, before we get started, we want to remind us of the rules we want to adhere to while on the air to make sure we have a safe environment for all of us. Remember to keep an open mind, maintain a positive attitude, and use respectful language. Jasmine, before we get started, do we have anyone to say hello to? Good morning before we start.
Yeah, we have Monique that is with us, and we have Sarah as
Good
well.
morning, Monique and Sarah. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. Okay, so in today's program, like I mentioned, we will be talking about social narratives and what are they and why are they so helpful for individuals with autism. And Olivia will be sharing with us some suggestions on how to create these stories and how to modify them so that we can use them in our daily lives for our loved ones with autism. So join us. We have a lot to talk about. Let's get started. My first question to you, Olivia, is what are social narratives and what are they for?
Okay, so social narratives, or more commonly called social story, were invented by educator Carol Gray. So they're essentially just short stories created to promote the social skills of an autistic person. One of the areas that autism affects is the area of social communication. So for a person who's living with autism, typically social norms that are communicated either verbally or non-verbally are not explicit to them. In other words, we have to teach them the social rules through social stories so they can understand those rules of society that we take for granted. So, for example, things like when someone greets you, you typically greet them in return. Social stories are effective because they offer the possibility of being able to teach people with autism these social rules, again, related to a specific topic, but it's in a visual format. Many autistic people have problems processing language and understand better when they can see, visually what is being explained to them.
And Olivia, are there any rules or steps to create an effective social story?
Yes. If you could please share the PowerPoint, Yasmin.
I'm working
Yes.
on it right now.
Yeah, there's 6 rules that is recommended that you should follow to ensure you create an effective social story. So the first is that the title should be short, but be very clear about what the topic you want to cover in the story, or the social problem you want to improve. So, for example, we all feel angry sometimes, or what should I do when I go to the library? The second rule is you should personalize the story. You can use photos of your child if they're still at the cognitive level that requires photos. You can experiment with photos of other children, but if it doesn't seem to work, you can go back to the photos of him or her, and then you can try later on again, the photos of the other children. After photos come drawings, and finally the most advanced and the most abstract level is words only. The one thing I would recommend too is to make sure you always use words under the photo or drawings, because that's just going to be another way to help a child learn to read if that's something that they're working on. Also, make sure the photos, if not of the child, are age appropriate for the individual. So, for example, if your child is a young adult, do not use photos that you find online of a young child. And likewise, if the story is for your daughter, don't use photos of a boy, use photos of other girls. You really want to just make it easy for him or her to understand the story. And so you need to create it in a certain way that he or she can relate to or identify with that story.
That's such a good point, because obviously making them understand, they already have an issue with relating to the social aspect of it. So making it the ownership of it, understand that, oh, this is talking about me. So thank you for making that point.
Yeah. And third rule is to keep the story positive. Make them understand that whatever the problem is common to many people. Name the situation during which the problem can be observed, what that trigger is. And by trigger, I mean like what causes the behavior you're trying to improve. So, for example, every time a child sees a dog, they start to scream, cry, run away, especially if they're running away without looking to see if cars are coming. So in this case, the dogs are the trigger or what causes the behavior. Let them know through the story that they're going to be okay. In this example, you can let them know through the story that many dogs are friendly, as well as steps to take the next time they see a dog walking near or in their direction. The fourth rule is to explain what steps they need to take to regain control of their emotions. Again, with the example of the fear of dogs, or to deal with the situation correctly or as socially expected. Be sure to give the instructions in the simplest way, without many words, and in the most direct manner. It's a good idea to create a list. This list can be visual if they don't know how to read yet. So create that list of the steps to take at all times if it's a common event. For example, if it's strategies to calm down, it's take a deep breath, count to 10. and then, if it's a different topic, the steps to follow in that particular social situation. The fifth rule is to end the story by letting them know that everything is going to be okay. So sometimes, even though they've tried their best to follow directions, they don't quite get it right on every occasion. And, you want to make sure to indicate that, it's okay that they can try again. The one caveat with this is that, sometimes there are times when the behavior just can never be allowed because it's dangerous behavior. So, for example, leaving the house without permission, going into the pool without permission or supervision. So, in these cases, it's not necessary to let them know that everything will be fine and they can try again. That doesn't work for those particular cases. For those, you need to just be very firm and let them know that this type of behavior is just unacceptable. And finally, the sixth rule specifies how to create effective sentences in the story. This is kind of like the big thing, in my opinion, that kind of differentiates a social story from just like a regular typical story. Is there's a very specific way that sentences need to be written. And if you go to the next slide, please, Jasmine. So there's basically 6 types of sentences. So they're descriptive, directive, perspective, affirmative, control, and cooperative. So in addition to that, you need to make sure that you write the sentences in the first or second person. So that, that is so that if the person with autism is the one that had written the story and we're listening to their thoughts, or as if we were speaking directly to the person in the case of second person. So for example, with the phrases you have for first person, it's sometimes I feel angry when blank happens to me. Or for second person, it's when you feel angry, you should do this. Okay. So I want to break down these different sentence categories too. So descriptive sentences, as the name indicates, describe clearly but in the most direct way the social situation in which we want to work on and the instructions to follow. Directive sentences serve to give the specific social rules for a social situation you're trying to improve. Perspective sentences are written from either the perspective of the individual with autism or from the perspective of others. Affirmative sentences are sentences that support, general social rules. It could also be like viewed more as like societal values or beliefs. And control sentences. These sentences direct the individual with autism in what to do. And finally, cooperative sentences explain to the individual with autism who can help them and or where they can get help.
Okay, so this is wonderful, and I just want to tell the audience that we're going to be sharing this PowerPoint so they can understand. And right now, why are we explaining all the types of sentences and how to put it together? It just means that when you're reading a social story, you will notice these types of sentences. And it just means as you're constructing the story, each and every one of those sentences are written in that order to say, okay, the first sentence reads like this and like this and like this. And there's a method for it because it's going to direct the child. And as you read the story or the adult, it's going to direct the individual in a way that it makes sense. And if it's written in first person versus in second person, it has to do with their cognitive levels for purposes of understanding. And you mentioned something that in one of the steps that I wanted to comment on, carrying the instructions of what they need to do in a visual format. I love that because that is so useful for the classroom setting. For as a teacher, I would have loved to seen one of my students when they come in, especially sometimes in the morning, they have such a difficulty with transitions. They may have. Sometimes you don't know what happens before they get to school, right? They may have had a rough transition in the morning. And boy, wouldn't it have been wonderful if maybe they didn't sleep well last night, or maybe they had a rough transition getting into the car because they were running late and rushing out. And I would have loved to see one of my students come in with one of those to where they already knew. I would have told them, pull out your sequence, basically. So I really love that idea. That was wonderful. So thank you for sharing that. Anyway,
yeah, and it's this. I don't think it's like you're kind of, to go a little bit more to your point, what you were saying. It's like I don't think people should worry about like, oh, I need to have like 6 descriptive sentences, and oh, I only have 4 directive.
yeah,
Not to get so hung up on that. It's just
no,
kind of showing how the flow of the sentences are a little bit different from what would be maybe in like a conventional speech.
exactly. And let me tell you what I remember I saw a YouTube video on a family that and the individual was already an adult, and they were having trouble at a restaurant because when the individual with autism was already done with dinner, he or she wanted to leave. And so the family was still during their dinner. So it was just as easy as putting in a card, in one page, the order of things, using one of here, one of there, a few of the sentences. When I'm done with dinner, these are my options of things that I can do. So it was like on one side of a list, and I think they did it with the either the one of the therapists. I don't know if it was an ABA therapist or another type of therapist, but they did it, and it was laminated, and it was just one side. So it was a one pager, but it was done in a social narrative way. So you're right. It doesn't have to be very complicated. It can be as simple as that. I've seen other videos where it was done with, even Crayolas and in a book format, and they read it at night. And it depends on how it is, but it's good to know how it is formatted, and the certain rules about it so that you can adapt it to your loved one's needs, right? Great. I love it. Anyway, my question to you now, are there any social templates, especially for someone that has never created a social story before?
Yes. So, Yasmin, if you could move to the next slide, please. Yeah, if you look online for social stories or social narratives, you'll find hundreds of already created social stories. Some of these are free, and others you may need to pay like a small fee for them. But they often come as, they're formatted as Word documents, PowerPoint files, or PDFs. So you don't need to have special software in order to use them and edit them. So Carol Gray's website, our website, Autism Speaks, and Pinterest are just some of the places you can find already created social stories. I know you mentioned another one, Lourdes, when we did Cafecito, is like teachers pay teachers.
Teachers pay teachers. Sometimes they have the special education teachers on Teachers Pay Teachers sometimes post some, and sometimes they post them for free. So that's another place that you might be able to check out those. And even when they do post things for prices of Teachers Pay Teachers, it's like $1 here or there, $5.
Yeah.
even the fancy little things that I've seen, I think the most that anything costs in there is like $20, and the fabulous stuff that they make. So it's worth checking it out. But a lot of it is look for free stuff.
Yeah, a lot of things are free, or again, like $1 or $2, like you're mentioning.
Yeah, very. Yeah. So it's wonderful. Yeah, and we were mentioning in Cafecito also that even YouTube videos are available with already made stories, and a lot of therapists have made stuff, even for teachers, like fire drill. Social stories have already been done in video forms. As a teacher, I would look for those for my schools to prepare my students for the fire drills. So I would look for all that kind of stuff already done in video format.
The only thing with like, so they come in lots of different formats these days. The only thing I would maybe think of the individual with autism that you're wanting to have this story for is like if there are issues of like being very obsessed with technology, or where that's going to actually be more distracting than helpful with the story. Maybe try and find something where it could be printed out and it'd be like more or like a physical paper format. But there are different options, and especially if you're trying to find something in a pinch, that could be a great option too.
Yeah, and sometimes it can supplement it, and sometimes they may need, like you mentioned, they may need their pictures on it because they need that level of, they're at that cognitive level that a drawing or a picture of someone else is not registering that it relates to them. So you have to make those judgment calls to decide how are they going to identify. And I always say repetition is the key, repetition is the key, repetition is the key, right? Get it? Repetition is the key. You have to read it. You have to do it. Anyway, so yes. Jazz, I think it's you now. Jasmine?
My apologies, I was muted. So does a social study always need to be modified, or can they be used as it is?
So if the social story is very general, the autistic individual has never used a social story before, or they struggle with abstract representations like we were just talking about, and or the story is being used to help with a very specific behavior or situation, that those are kind of the instances where I would recommend modification and personalization. I know sometimes modifying a social story can seem intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. I would recommend maybe first gathering a few different social stories on the topic just to get ideas and to brainstorm. And you could possibly use language from different stories for the version you're creating. So, for example, you can gather a few different social stories on using the toilet. In one story, you like that there's more detailed information on how to use the toilet if the individual needs to pee or to poop. And another story, you like that it mentions who the individual can ask for help with their clothes, since the person that you're creating the story for, they have fine motor issues. And so in that final version that you create, you can include both of these ideas. You're not going to be limited to only one or the other. Or maybe, a parent decides to eliminate details from a story because their child is only struggling with a very specific part of using the toilet. So all these things are very, they can become very individualized, and there's a lot of room for creativity as well.
Awesome. And that is and you have to know your loved one, right? So, and I like that. Just researching and picking what works for your loved ones, and like I said, it could be as simple and sometimes on the go. Sometimes on the go, you may need one in the middle of the store because something came up in the middle of the store. A situation, and you just need to create one. It's a visual support, right? So Olivia, is there anything else you want to share with our audience?
Yes. So yeah, then thank you, Yasmin. So I did want to kind of, talk about this point again, because I think people sometimes have this misconception that social stories need to look like a professional book. And again, it just doesn't need to be that fancy. It could just be something you create. I mean, it could be on just stick figures on piece of paper, or even in Microsoft Word or PowerPoint with photos you've taken or images you found online and you've just printed out on computer paper. If our audience would like to learn more about social stories, we have this amazing book by, again, the inventor of social stories, Carol Gray, and that has hundreds of examples and a lot more information on creating social stories. Also, if you have a loved one that, or an individual with autism that has a card consultant, their consultant can help with creating social stories or providing feedback on a story that you've created. So where there are definitely more resources and a lot of support out there. So don't be intimidated, and please give it a try.
I was muted and I couldn't find my little thing. Like, don't you hate it? Anyway, yes, and I've seen, like I said, I've seen on YouTube because I search things and I've seen things as simple, like you said, stick figures and this and the other, one pagers, something, book likes, pictures, drawings, and video formats. So it can be as easy as a complicated as you want it to be, or as your loved one needs it to be. It can be adapted to meet the needs of your loved ones. So don't be intimidated, like you said. So wonderful. Thank you so much. We're almost at the end of the show, but before we move on, I just wanted to say to those of you who have been with us throughout the show, thank you for being here. If you have any comments or questions, be sure to leave them in the comment section. We always check on those. Even if you are watching this after we get off the air, we come back and try to check on those and answer your questions if you have any. Talking about that, Jasmine, do we have any comments or questions to?
No, Lourdes, we don't have any comments or questions.
Perfect. Again, if you're watching this after we go off the air and you leave us a comment or a question, just and we end up using that comment or question to make a future show, we'll be sure to give you credit on the air for giving us the idea. So go ahead and leave us something. And again, we always try to go back and comment on your comments and questions. So please do so. But before we move on, I wanted to thank Olivia for bringing us this information. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And also I wanted to remind you all that from now on, we're coming on the air every other week. So we are not going to be back until September. So for the topics for September, they've already been posted. On the 9th, we are going to have Doctora Leon and Mrs. Cedeno, who are going to be talking to us about the criteria for the diagnosis and treatment of autism spectrum disorder from the neuropsychological point of view. So you can't miss that. And also on the 23rd, we're going to be talking with Jasmine about the cultural perspectives of autism from different cultures. So can't miss that either. So we'll see you here. Anyway, and in terms of announcements, I also wanted to remind you that on October 1st, we are going to join forces with other organizations to bring you for the first time in person the Arts in the Park event at this year's Yes Fair event. And we have already uploaded that flyer and have begun to sign up exhibitors. We only have a few spots left. It's going to be full of excitement and exciting activities. And if you are the owner of a therapy business, whether it's OT, PT, ABA therapy business, or an arts-based or movement business, and you would like to exchange a 20-minute activity for a free table, or for you to exchange information with our audience, be sure to contact me, lordsq@usf.edu, so we can exchange information and get you set up. And we would love to have you there, so you can't miss it. And those of you in our audience, be sure to meet us. It's going to be at the All People Center. It's on Sly Avenue, basically between on 56. It's between Hillsborough Avenue and Waters Avenue, and it's where they have a beautiful adapted park, and it's wonderful. All People's Life Center. It has a longer name. They changed the name, but so be sure to meet us over there. Anyway, that brings us to the end of the show, but I didn't want to go before asking you again, as usual, favor, and is that you go into the link that we're going to place there for you to give us a grade and let us know how we're doing. If this information and this type of information is important to you, and remember that this is how we can justify the time that it takes us to put together this type of information and to be in the air with you. And so we thank you for helping us out with that. We need one of these evaluations every time we go on the air. So thank you ahead of time for helping us out with that. All right. So before we go, we'd like to remind you to please give us a like, share this video on your page, and with all those you know that can benefit from this type of information, and meet us here every other Friday at 10:45-ish, so that we can spill the beans on important information related to autism as we drink our coffee with you. Okay, until then, we wish you goodbye
and hot coffee.
See you, everyone. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.